You know, honestly, never have I felt so weird whenever somebody would ask me about a new big movie coming out. When the discussion about an upcoming reboot appears, it's common if someone would say, "Have you seen that movie yet?" And all I could do is just respond with, "No, but technically, yes." In recent years, Hollywood has become so fascinated with remaking their own movies to the point that the ideas of a big budget blockbuster and an original film are really starting to get distant from one another. So much so that it can even feel like you're surrounded by movies that are technically new, but you already know about. During the time that I'm recording this, if I go into the theaters now, I have the option to go watch either King Kong, Disney's Beauty and the Beast, Ghost in the Shell, and The Smurfs. I currently feel like Robin Williams from Jumanji, where I just want to run around to people and ask,
"What year is it?"
It was brand new.
No. What year is it?
I don't know about you, but this is starting to get out of hand. Seriously, what's with Hollywood's recent obsession with remaking or rebooting old movies instead of making new ones? It hasn't been this bad before. So why the reboot boom now? Well, this took a lot of thinking and analyzing not just those movies themselves, but also the current state of cinema, and how it really does say a lot about how mainstream films are, and how we are as a consuming culture. So why are there so many remakes and reboots? Let's find out. Now, the biggest thing you need to understand when it comes to major studios nowadays is that they are getting less and less interested in making movies. I know that I sound absolutely crazy, but hear me out. They don't really want to make movies, but instead, they want to make franchises. Something that can lead to several movies and even beyond that. Why franchises? Because when you build a franchise, you also build a fan base so that when more movies and other products are released, you know that there is already a market for it. No need to build up an audience, the audience is already there. For major studios, it's a lot safer to make something for an existing franchise than to create something new, because it would require a lot less risk, and they know that people are ready to hand out their money for it. That's why franchise movies have a much bigger budget than original films, because studios are more confident to make them bigger and better for the loyal fans that will be there no matter what. Of course, that's just the basic business of franchises. When it comes to remakes and reboots, they fall into the same category, but they hold something extra. Nostalgia. More than ever, nostalgia has become so profitable because people are willing to pay to relive that magical moment when they were younger, when they first discovered the original. Another special element it holds is that they can be connected to a legendary movie. We all have at least heard about the original one way or another. In a way, this could be like a new introduction to audiences to classic films and franchises, and to take on the role of the original, but for a new generation. This is exactly how Jurassic World and Star Wars The Force Awakens became the highest grossing films of not just 2015, but possibly even the entire decade. By the way, I also count sequels that have been released many years after the previous films, since they have the same effect that I mentioned about remakes and reboots. It's those movies that really do define more about us as consumers than I would say about Hollywood. Because we have been going to see these franchise movies more than anything else for a long time. If you look at all the highest grossing films from 2000 onward, you'll find that there are only 3 that did not come from an already existing film franchise. There's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's or Philosopher's Stone in 2001, Avatar in 2009, and Frozen in 2013. We as consumers are more willing to spend on franchise movies because we are familiar with them and we trust them to have something that we'd end up enjoying like last time. You see, people and Hollywood executives are very similar. Like how consumers would want to play safe and spend on a ticket for a movie from a franchise they're familiar with, Hollywood would want to make more movies for familiar franchises because they know people would go see them. In business, trust is a key factor, which is why our consuming society would associate us with the franchises and brands. When we know a company makes good products, we are more likely to buy from them than their competitors. Same goes with remakes and reboots. We're already familiar with the original films, and normally, we always hear great things from them. That's why we go spend our money on them, because we can trust them that they already have something that's good, but can also offer something new at the same time. However, the key word here is that we trust them to deliver. That doesn't always mean that they will. The biggest issue with remakes and reboots nowadays is that it is so easy to tell when they're being made just for the money. Some executives can think that they can reboot anything and they can make a quick buck out of it. But the truth is that the fans know these franchises more than Hollywood, so they can easily determine if what they saw was good or just a piece of crap. A quick way to know if a remake or reboot succeeds or fails to do justice to the original is the feeling. When you watch it, do you get the same feeling as you do watching the first films? Remaking or rebooting is not about telling the same story with updated technology. It's about capturing the same spirit that made the film that you're remaking or rebooting so beloved in the first place. It's like the primary goal it's supposed to achieve as a movie. If people want to see the 2015 version of Poltergeist, they're most likely expecting something that feels like the 1982 film. If people want to check out the 2010 version of Clash of the Titans, they'd probably want something like the 1981 movie. And if people are going to see the 2015 film Vacation, they're probably thinking that they would get something like National Lampoon's Vacation from 1983. Did people get what they want from them? Of course not! What usually happens with these bad remakes and reboots is that they either go way too far from the source material by focusing more on doing its own thing, to the point that it's becoming questionable to why is it even a remake in the first place, or they try way too hard to stick so close to the original to the point of offering nothing new and lose all reasons to be a valid alternative. That, and also because they're usually handed to bad filmmakers. Sometimes the explanation can easily be just that the movie sucks. Especially in the modern age of the internet, people can be so quick to determine if they are interested in seeing a reboot or not that a trailer or even a picture can be a make or break deal. When you look back at 2016, there have been plenty of remakes and reboots released, like Ben-Hur, Ghostbusters, Pete's Dragon, and Blair Witch. I'd even throw in those long-awaited sequels like Zoolander 2, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 2, and Independence Day Resurgence. This is only a list of some from that last year, but most of them failed to bring in money at the box office. So much so that films like Ghostbusters and Ben-Hur ended up becoming box office bombs. Again, it's easy to determine if a remake or reboot respects its source material, but because many of the movies failed to do so, audiences punish them by not buying a ticket. So yeah, more often than not, we would end up being handed more bad remakes and reboots than good ones. If we want to gain back the trust of Hollywood, they should stop making them and do more original stuff, right? Okay, hold on a second. Yes, more often than not, they suck. But don't be so quick to forget about the point of remakes and reboots in the first place. You see, remaking or rebooting a movie is just another form of film adaptations. It's the same thing as taking a book, a comic, or a video game and turn them into a movie. In fact, remaking movies have been done since the very beginning of cinema. Okay, well, maybe a little bit after, because you need movies if you want to reboot them. But when it comes to turning an older movie into a new one, you have to do a careful balance of offering both something old and something new at the same time. Remember that it does happen when remakes and reboots can pull it off well. When you look at films like Peter Jackson's King Kong or Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book, you can debate if those movies are as good as the originals, but the important thing is that they are good movies on their own, and they succeed to do their jobs as alternatives to the original. What's more is that sometimes movies can be adapted from more obscure films, and they could turn out to be some of the greatest without people knowing it. Believe it or not, films like Scarface, The Departed, True Grit, and The Ten Commandments were all remakes from either a much older film or a movie from a different country. With that said, it can happen when the remake becomes so beloved that it can end up being more popular and make a bigger impact than the original. So when you hand a remake or a reboot to someone who is not only a good filmmaker, but also understands the source material, you can end up with something that can be quite entertaining. Look, what I'm trying to say is that it's easy for a remake or a reboot to be bad, but that doesn't mean that they can't be good. Sure, it's more common to find people remaking stuff with the wrong intentions and even without knowledge on the source material, but it shouldn't be treated differently than any form of film adaptation. As long as there is a trust for the companies to get the right people who know what they're doing, then audiences won't have a problem spending their money on them to, hopefully, relive the magic. And worst case scenario, if the remake or reboot ends up being bad, then at least we still have the originals no matter how successful those films can be. A good example of what I mean is Disney's live-action reboots like Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, Maleficent, and Bill Condon's Beauty and the Beast. They follow a similar pattern when it comes to their lifespan. They would start off as this big must-watch movie in theaters and would end up as one of the highest grossing features of the year. But then, a few months later, both the public and even Disney throw them off to the wasteland to be forgotten and put their focus back on the original animated films, because they already established their place as a timeless classic, while the reboots are just a product of their time. The reality is that you can't stop Hollywood from remaking movies. You can only encourage them to do them right. And you'll see in the long run which ones will prevail and which ones will fall into obscurity. Maybe it can take a while, or even until the movies themselves have to be released, but what you have to do is trust them that they can do justice to the original source material. Maybe later you might end up getting a reminder if someone ever decides to do a remake of all this. Rather if they make something really informative or something stupid, I really don't know. But I better trust the person if they know what they're doing.
No, Carl, you can't do this.
Tell them the studio pressured us into an early departure.
It's not ethical.
What are they gonna do, sue me? Huh? They can get in line.